with Renee. All right, what's up, world? Welcome back to another edition of Saturdays with Renee, featuring Renee Johnston. I'm Jared Ball. Peace. How you doing, Renee?
I'm all right. I'm glad that I still get a chuckle from that intro. I still get a chuckle. I wonder if like a whole year from now I'll still get a chuckle. It's
Yeah, at some point, we just gotta adjust the graphic, improve the graphic. I've reached my limitations, but aside from that, the drop is still funny to me.
the drop
And
is
then when
great.
and then I can't help picture that when I was trying to do it and all the different versions of it. And my wife was sitting there and she was like, nah, yeah, that one.
But
With Renee.
tell her I
With
said thank
Renee.
you.
So, oh man. So, welcome everybody. Please do join us, or as you are joining us, like, share, subscribe. Put this in your socials. Invite others to join you.
Did I see we got somebody new this morning? Did I see that pop up? Did I see the light
Did
up?
Well, let's see. We do. We got Vince B as a new member. Welcome, welcome, welcome. Appreciate you. And Librarian, this show intro is a million times better than anything AI squeezes out. All right. Thank you very much.
Thank you
That's a
very
shot
much.
at my
Thank you.
EYL drops. I'm not mad at you though. I'm not mad at you. The authenticness in the Renee drop is important. So but yes, everybody, welcome. Do all the things and join us. We got a big show this morning. And I just want to say very quickly, I got a very busy day. And one of the reasons it's busy is because immediately after the show, I'm going to miss Warrior Class, or I'm going to have to watch Warrior Class from the car. Because I got to run down to D.C. because unfortunately today is the services for the passing of Rick Tingling Clemens, who many may not know, but many in the D.C. area will be familiar with, at least in the D.C. area and revolutionary circles around the world. Rick was a father, a husband, a former Black Panther Party member, a committed Marxist, Leninist, revolutionary brother in D.C. Shout out to Michelle, his widow, and all of their kids, Mao, Toussaint. I'm forgetting everybody. Forgive me, but much love to everybody, and I'll be seeing all of them later today. But I just want to give that quick shout out. He was an important figure in my own life and development, and he will be missed. So rest in power to Rick Tingling Clemens, and I'll be down there at the service immediately
Rest
after
in power.
this.
Rest
So
in
yeah.
power. And while you're doing
So
that, I'm actually okay, people are making fun of you in the chat, so I don't
already.
we had the EYL background up.
Oh, do we? Oh, damn. Oh, damn. What do you talk about? It is the logo too. What are you talking about though? I don't know what you're talking about.
Look, it's all
My bad.
I watch I'm like in my office watching it with the sound down real low, so I'm getting getting in trouble watching EYL in my office on Friday mornings. But all right, so I am currently actually in South Jersey. Today is the Green Party of New Jersey State Convention. So
word up.
I'm hiding in a room, and the convention is happening in another room. But I had like an hour and change drive. So my theory was I drive down, miss the morning stuff because I'm already familiar. I'm on the state committee, so I already know all the morning stuff that's happening. But this way I could be there for the afternoon without having to drive in between. So I also have a crazy day, but it's going to be what it is.
But
it's going to be what it is.
The good news now just announced is that all of us can end the day, whatever our day is, all of us can end our day today at 8:00 with a special Saturday Night Live pop-up of EYL. So
there we go.
So We have a little bit of fun planned for this evening. So if you got time, come on back. But
Uh,
okay.
I will definitely be jumping on for
Yeah,
that.
that's good. Yeah, we just set that up. So that should be fun. Nice way to end the day. I'm gonna need that. And because but I'm also debating David Swanson after I come back from the services
Okay.
on the issue of violence. So then after that,
Mm.
I get to chill with EYL.
So you got a super busy day.
Super busy day and intermittently saw Daruba yesterday.
I
Shout out
saw
to
the picture.
Orasami. Saw Daruba. Check out the little I couldn't it wasn't my interview to share. So all I brought back what I could for now. A little discussion he had between talking about the BLA and Hamas. So that's up on the
Mm.
channel where folks get a chance. Go check that out because it's not it's short, but it's sweet. And man, shout out to Daruba, man. So we'll be seeing more of him. We'll be seeing more of in the
I
next few
actually I need
days
to. I've
and
been
week.
meaning to send him a text. I need to reach out to him actually. So I'm glad.
You should
I
see if you could come
take care of
through.
that.
Come on down real quick. Come on down real quick. Maybe
I'm
maybe
trying.
take
I'm
a.
trying. I'm trying to make it down there for the 19th, but Sundays are tricky. I got. I'm supposed to
Oh
be.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
You know.
Mm,
But I
yeah,
mean,
well.
yeah. Well, exactly. And Jared, as part of my now family, is up on some madness that's happening in my world right now. So once I have the go ahead, we can talk about it on a Saturday once I'm
Sure.
sure that it's not going to cause me additional stress and issue. And just a heads up, next week, Mahi, our friend who visited a couple of months back, she is going to try and make it. They are currently, there's an encampment now. I think it's Syracuse. I don't know if it's on the Syracuse campus or it's near Syracuse. So she's been kind of dealing with that. And I'm going to see if Professor Campbell can come with her so we can talk about some of the drama that has been happening at Syracuse University and some updates on what's happening in the Sudan and the Sahel region with some people who fully know the details. So that's the goal for next week. We'll see if we can make it
Renee
happen. And then the
bringing
week
Black
after that,
Studies legends in the joint.
right. And then the week after that, we have Two Black coming, right? So I got to make sure I get his
Too
book
black.
finished. I got to, that gives me 2 weeks to finish his book, which is plenty of time. So
Oh yeah, I just am continuing to work my way through it too. It's going to be a great conversation. I
yeah,
can't.
yeah,
That's very dope.
yeah.
So you bring in current legends of Black Studies, future legends of Black Studies.
That's the
Saturdays
goal.
is big time over here, and in between you get to work with the marginalized, you know, mediocre Black Studies. All right, there we go. You cover the whole, you know what I'm saying? Future, present, once upon a time, maybe could have been, not quite going to make it.
Oh, as you say that, I told you I watched American, what's the name of it, with
Fiction.
American Fiction on the plane. I'm like 2/3 of the way through Erasure, the book,
Oh,
because yeah,
wow.
because this is the thing that I do. Like I was like, okay, I'm gonna watch it first, and then I'm gonna read the book. The book is way better than the movie, by the way.
Usually that would be the
FYR.
case.
Yeah,
Okay.
that's usually the case. But it's I thought of you this entire thing. Watching it, I thought of you, and now reading it, I'm thinking of you.
I'm telling you, I was like,
Yeah, I was like, okay, I understand completely,
you see how they got me. That's
completely.
all I'm
Yeah,
saying. You see how I
yeah,
got caught up the first time,
yeah.
right? I
I
needed
do,
them
I
Tume to
do,
bring me back
I
because
do.
I was like, man, I was like, did somebody write my life?
And I haven't watched that show with you and Intume because I wanted to watch the movie
Oh
first,
yeah,
and
yeah,
then
yeah,
now
yeah.
I want to finish the book, and then I'll go back and watch that conversation. So we'll have to fit that in somewhere, and we still haven't talked about 26.2 to life. So we need to.
That's right.
Right.
Maybe we can add that today. I don't know if our guest maybe has seen it, or it might fit in with a little
We'll
bit
see.
today,
Yeah,
but we'll see. Yeah.
We got a lot.
Yeah, that's right. Oh, wow. Yeah. And shout out to him too, mate. We got big things coming from him too, by the way. Like it's a lot going on. It's a lot happening.
It's a lot, man. It's a lot.
Yeah. But shout out to my big bro in the chat, the marginalized and the mediocre. We in the building, bro. I tell you.
Oh man.
All right. So what's happening today? What are we doing?
What's going on? So you sent me a video that you want us to watch, a music video, and I watched it. And
oh man.
Did you forget? How you I completely forgot, Jared? What is going on with you?
I said, hey, can we start the show with this? And you were like, yeah, of course. And then I was like, I'm gonna forget. So we won't start the show with it, but we gonna
bring it in.
I'll bring it in. What I was very happy that I don't remember who sent it to me. I got to go find out who sent it to me, but I am very happy to see this artist, to be introduced to this artist. And in the context of this sort of ongoing question and discussion, we started sort of on the remix and throughout the platform now around where are the MCs? Kendrick just dropped a monstrous verse against Drake, and this may be the new ether. We'll have to come back, have that debate some other time. But the question was, well, what do these cats have to say about real world issues? You got all these brilliant bars for each other.
Right.
Where are the MCs when it comes to, so somebody, the world was like, all right, Jared.
Let me send you something.
Let me put you on, and if he could just share screen. There we go. Okay. This is the answer.
Yeah, from Mississippi, Chicago, from Palestine to Congo, screaming liberation till I'm sore it's hard to swallow. If they do this today, then what they gonna do tomorrow? Netanyahu, Biden, and Harris is such a deadly combo. See APEC, gonna pay stacks, politicians gonna take that. They go way back like wave caps and 8-tracks. We kill children when we pay tax. That's how they fuck us over with no latex. Being black and American kinda made me nervous. They shoot my brother in the street and tell me he deserve it. Treat us like vermin with sentences that we serve it. The way it's all connected is something that I'm still learning. See, all around the world, oppressed people are rising. You try to gaslight us, we witness the colonizing. And you can justify it however you wanna try it. That don't negate the fact that these little babies are dying. And freedom's not selective, we can see your objective. When we try to question the cleansing, you call us anti-Semitic. But all my Jewish brothers speaking out and standing up. Their religion's being hijacked, I guess they had enough. If those were your babies, then we be standing up for you, calling them people crazy. And it don't matter if you Jew, if you black or you white, if you brown or you blue, all of my people unite. We ain't got nothing to lose. Yeah, it's profit over people in Gaza, they need forces. They leave them in good portions while hoarding their resources. Behold the pale horses who ride into the horizon, realizing they was lies as we strive to rebuild lives. Staring at my phone screen is like a house of horrors, erasing generations and churches getting demolished. Babies in the rubble, they crying out for their mothers. I beg to God for peace, for truth, wisdom, and knowledge. Free Palestine, free Palestine. Free Palestine, free Palestine. Free Palestine, free Palestine. Free Palestine, free Palestine.
Now listen, that's called my boy. You know nothing about that.
Yes, indeed.
Listen.
Genesis B, is that how you say their name? At Genesis capital BE. That joint is, yeah. So thanks to whoever sent that to me, and it's actually a perfect even segue to the conversation we're having.
Absolutely.
I mean, you know, so that was so all right. Yeah, thanks for reminding me. Damn.
What would you do without me, Jared?
Be lost, just be sitting and spinning in my chair like this. Spinning in circles.
Lord. Alrighty. So, audience, do you want to bring Matt up and then we can?
Sure, absolutely. Welcome. I didn't know if you were going to do
fast. You like brought me
I
right
didn't
up.
know if there was going to be like a bio intro, set the whatever, but filmmaker, documentarian.
Yes. And Matthew, so you know, the audience is somewhat familiar with you. We did show the trailer for Reimagining Safety a while back, and we've all been in conversation about trying to see how we can get the audience to view your documentary. And so, audience, my crew in the chat and all who watch this later, this is Matthew Solomon. Matthew Solomon is a filmmaker and director, and he produced a documentary called Reimagining Safety, which is a deep dive into policing and why it needs to be abolished as it stands. Matthew, however, is also Jewish, and Matthew and I are very, very good friends, and we get to have, as such, really good conversations about all the things. And we got into a talk the other day about Zionism, and Matthew explained Zionism to me in a way that literally I don't think I've ever had anyone explain it to me. And because of that, I was like, oh, Matthew, you got to come on the show. We got to have this conversation in public. And so I text Jared and I was like, Jared's family history, as he has shared with everyone, includes his family leaving Israel because they did not want to be a part of the Zionist project. I'll let Jared tell it.
No, I just want to be clear. They left Palestine because Israel had not yet been imposed. Correct. And they left earlier on before that level of the project because they saw what was coming. So yeah.
Okay.
But, yeah.
I'm glad you dropped in that connection because I was not clear on the timeline. And for me, this is a very, very important conversation that needs to happen that I feel like is not happening and is contributing to all of the chaos because people don't understand the history and people are afraid to even engage in these conversations. And all of this is leading to some real trauma that is happening just everywhere. And I feel like that intersection of policing and the Zionist path and Jewish people who don't follow the Zionist path and all of these understandings, if we can have this conversation, is just like, I just felt like the audience needed it. So we're gonna roll with it. I'll be honest, I don't really have a plan. I text Matthew, he was getting on a plane yesterday and I was like, what are you doing tomorrow? So the goal here is to have a real conversation, and I'm really grateful to you, Matthew, for being willing to engage in that. It's it's big and it's important, and I could not think of two better people to have this conversation with. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, and just to be clear, I'm not a Zionist, but I was raised inside of Zionism, and so the conversation that Renee and I were having, because she was like every time I ask somebody like why do you think this way, or what is it about Israel, like people get defensive and they get mad. And so I was like, well, let me break it down for you, because I was raised inside of this, so I know the mindset and the history of it, but I've also divested from it and am not a part, and anti-Zionist, and I'm not a part of that. But it was more a question about it was more a conversation about this is what we have been taught, and this is why these folks are so radicalized and all of that. So I just wanted to put that out there also. I'm not arguing for Zionism in this conversation. I'm just here to kind of share what we were taught, and why Zionists think the way that they do.
So, Jared, do you have a place to start, or should we just start with Matthew explaining what he explained to me?
Yeah, no, let's start there. I don't have I'll happily jump in after, but I'd like to Matthew, go ahead and lay it out as you were. Yeah.
Okay, and you know, like, this is probably more of an overview because there's a lot to it. And just real quick, you know, in the comments, David Silberg says we look alike. I'm sure we do. It is May the 4th, so, you know, May the 4th be with you. And I do love the intro at the beginning of the show. So here's the thing. So I was born and raised in Los Angeles, and you know, what led to me making Reimagining Safety ultimately was because I grew up in very diverse, integrated communities. And as a child and growing up, excuse me, I was always noticing inconsistencies and hypocrisies inside of Judaism, inside of, you know, the ideals that we were taught about the United States, like everybody's equal, you know, we're all supposed to be treated equally, and like in reality that wasn't the case. And so, you know, that's been a thing that I've been aware of. So, you know, as a child going to Hebrew school to learn about my heritage, at the root of everything in Jewish teachings, but you know, more specifically in Zionist teachings, is that everybody wants to kill us and eradicate us from existence, the Jewish people. And every story that we're taught is like, we lived in a place, everybody hated us, wanted to kill us. We fought back, you know, we got our, you know, we survived, we moved on to another place, and the same thing happened. And the other part is Jews are the chosen people, right? So there's this, you know, we are the ones, we are the chosen people, and everybody wants to kill us, everybody hates us because of that, and because of that is what we were taught. So, you know, all the stories that are tied to the holidays, a lot of the holidays are rooted in that. My grandparents on my mom's side were Holocaust survivors. And so, you know, my grandfather and my grandmother had, like, you know, 10 and 11 brothers and sisters each, most of whom were killed in the Holocaust. And, you know, my grandparents were in the Warsaw Ghetto. They were able to escape, you know, through Russia, then to Czechoslovakia. Other parts of my family fought with the partisans in the forest, you know, against the Nazis. And then ultimately, my grandparents were waiting to either go to Israel or to go to the United States. And my grandfather's brother sponsored him into the United States. And that's ultimately why they ended up here in Los Angeles. So, you know, Nazi Germany, you know, murdered 6 million Jews. Nobody wanted to take in Jewish refugees. Even before the actual Holocaust started, Jewish people were trying to flee and couldn't go anywhere. Like, you know, the United States wouldn't let them in. Britain wouldn't let them in. Other countries wouldn't let them in. Hitler wanted to ship the Jews off to Madagascar and just leave them all there, but that didn't work out. There was a ship called the St. Louis, which brought refugees to the United States, but it was stopped at Cuba, so that was turned back. And so, like, it's this history of, again, we're being murdered, everybody wants to kill us, and we can't go anywhere, right? So then when the state of Israel was established as the Jewish homeland, that was the place for Jewish people to go. And so in the story that, so we're taught all of this. We're taught that, you know, the state of Israel was established as a Jewish homeland. It's this tiny strip of desert, in the middle of the Middle East. But that's our homeland that we're returning to. Never in any of the conversations in the teachings was there any talk about there were people living there. So we were never taught like, oh, there were people living there that got displaced. It was just like, oh, here's this strip of land that nobody's using. Let's make that the Jewish homeland. And then the day after, because the surrounding Arab countries hated everybody, hated all the Jewish people, they attacked from all sides. And so, state of Israel is established for the Jewish people. Everybody hates us. They're coming in. They're trying to kill us. They gained some land, but because God is on our side, we push back and we take more land, which becomes Gaza, the West Bank, and some of the other territories. And then basically we have like the mindset is, if anybody attacks Jewish people or Israel, we have to fight back 10 times harder. God is on our side, so we have a right to fight back 10 times harder. Our survival is at stake, so we fight back 10 times harder. And so it doesn't, like, we're justified in any of these actions, right? And so then we have the occupied territories of Gaza and the West Bank, and the mindset is that out of the kindness of Israel's heart, we allowed those settlements to remain. But then they heavily police them like the ghettos in Warsaw, like the, apartheid in South Africa. But it's not called that because, it's like I equate this to like manifest destiny in the United States, right? We have a religious right to have this land. I also, we talk about like the great frontier in the United States, where, the talk about indigenous people in the way it's taught is, oh, there's just like some tribes here and there. It's not like, there's millions, hundreds of millions of people who are already living here that now are forced onto reservations or were, genocided, wiped, murdered and all of that. So that in a nutshell is what drives the whole thing. Like it's survival, it's entitlement, it's we are the chosen people, we have a God-given right to do this, and everybody wants to wipe us off the face of the earth, so we have to fight like this to exist. And so any pushback against the state of Israel is weaponized as being anti-Semitic. Like I was talking to a friend of mine in October, because she was like, we were trying to work through this, and I was like, basically the label anti-Semitism is like the white women's tears of religion or of the Middle East. Anti-Semitism does exist. I experience it. I have experienced it. It is playing out in a lot of ways, but it also gets weaponized to shut down conversations. And then the other part with the state of Israel was, in addition to being taught that, it was this empty space and that was the Jewish homeland, and the other countries agreed to grant us this out of the kindness of their heart, what I found out as an adult was it was actually a land deal also, and it was a strategic outpost for, westernization in the Middle East. So, so the story was, it's for our safety. Everybody gave this to us as a reparations in a sense, and that we are entitled to the land, but there was never any the people were there. We cleared the space out. We're treating, we're oppressing people in order to remain there. And so I'll leave it at that. And then we can, if there's questions, or we can talk more, but that's the gist of it.
Thank you, Matthew. You're muted.
Good. I'm good. No, I was just saying, go ahead. Go ahead. Yeah.
So
right on. Thanks for that.
I know. Thank you. So this was the thing that kind of blew me away, because one of the things that I didn't fully understand was, and I knew there was, this retelling of history, and that was kind of what was leading so many people who are Zionists to be where they are, but I didn't fully understand it until you explained it that way. So thank you.
Yeah.
So one of my questions is, was there just a complete like dismissal of some of the other pieces of history? Like, did you know that they looked at Uganda to place Israel? Like, is that part of the teachings where you taught about what happened in Namibia, where, you know, where they went first to kill off people to test how they could do the genocide in Germany? Like, was any of that part of the history that you were taught?
No, not in my Jewish schooling. I mean, I'm also I teach conflict resolution at Antioch University. I have a master's in public administration. I've done a lot of like my own historical research, just because I've always, I've been curious about like why we are the way we are, in the United States and in the world. So I know about that, but not through what I was taught in Hebrew school or any of the Jewish teachings or Jewish school teachings.
Wow. I mean,
Yeah.
it's fascinating to me that, and when you think about what's happening currently with removing history and not wanting to talk about, how Black people were treated in this country, and the dismissal of all of those things, like, I can see how these things happen, right? Like, I can see how people grow up and they're completely unaware that what they're being taught is like a revert. It's like a completely different version of history in order to make sure that they have the understanding specifically that they need to have in order to continue the imperialism and the occupation and the like, it's all just to make sure that it's a continuum, right?
Yeah.
Like, you have to always bring people in to make sure that you don't lose whatever power and things that you've gained, through imperialism. And it's wild to me.
Yeah,
Jared is deep in thought right now.
Yeah.
Like,
I wanted to add like one other thing too, is that, everybody in Israel has to be in the military. And I think it's 2 years. I forget, but you have to do your time in the military. And then once you're done with that 2 years, like you're basically on call until you're, I forget if it's like 30 or 40 years old or something, but they can call you back up, and that, the teaching is because like at any moment we could be at war because everybody wants to kill us, and so I was taught by former Israeli, well, Israeli citizens who were former soldiers, and so like all of that, the mentality is there, and it is tied to survival, right? So that's that. There's the element of the reality of it, which is, the Holocaust did happen, like all of these things have happened, but then it's how it gets weaponized against other people. And then, the other thing is like I remember when Obama was president, one of my cousins who's like very far on the right, his criticism was, oh, Obama hates Israel. And so like in American politics, there's this there's this metric for like, do you support Israel or do you hate Israel? And like there's no like it's all just words, right? But American politics is tied into the existence and support for Israel also. And so it's like I was in a discussion where it's like white supremacy and Zionism are, like twins, and then Zionism has the added aspect of it's a survival thing, because like for me, white supremacy was always like, what are white people so afraid of? We haven't really been attacked and murdered and things like that. But then on the Zionist Jewish side, it's a whole history of being attacked and murdered and people wanting to kill us.
Uh, you brought the question in, Renee. David is asking, do Arabs have to join the military? Do Arab Israelis have to join the military? Also, do you know the answer to that? I don't know the answer to that.
I don't know, actually. I thought it was all Israeli citizens, but I don't.
Yeah, I thought so too. And I always see, whenever we see movements of the forces, I see Arabs or Falasha or whoever else. But yeah, I don't know. That's yeah. But no, Renee, when you ask, I mean, my thought, what I've been thinking, listening is well, two sort of tracks of thought. One is my experience was just wildly different. I don't. So and the other was to think this being reminded that this is part of often enough Jewish experience has led to so much of the conflict in our family. Because so for instance, my mother's folks were all out of Russia and Eastern Europe. And so on the one hand, to our knowledge, there was never first of all, so I haven't got I don't want to be too autobiographical, but part of it is I can only think of it, I have to put this properly in the context of I didn't have any real relationship with either side of my family beyond my immediate, really just my mother for the most part. So I didn't really have any, I didn't go to Hebrew school, didn't grow up in a Jewish community, there was no practice. It was a vigorously atheist household. My mother was, and she's still here, but she, she has always been proud to be a Jew, but even her concept, and I put in the show description, about 20 years ago, we did a StoryCorps interview where I interviewed her, and if folks are that much interested, they can go and hear directly from her versions of this. But I was not raised with any of this. There would be some kind of maybe an initial bias in defense of Israel, but quick to be caught up with the criticism, starting particularly in my youth with their support of South Africa and apartheid. And then as I got older and I could bring my mother into an advanced analysis and terminology of the settler colonial relationship and all of that. But she had herself been, so her people come out of Russian Eastern Europe. They were communists and labor organizers, anti-Zionists, anti-religious, and all. So in the mythology, I don't know, I can't say I've verified any of these stories, but I call it on both sides, all the mythology I was raised with, but the version I was raised with was that my grandmother and her parents were forced out of what was then Palestine. She was born there. And if I remember, either born there or moved very early in her life and grew up in Palestine. But they were sort of forced out in part because of their friendship with the Arabs that they said there was never any problem, and their hostility towards any religiousness. And then this idea that in what was passed down to me was that they were tricked out of Europe by the promise of socialism, by the promise of this, that, and the third. And we're like, wait a minute, we're now oppressing Arabs, and they could see that ramping up, and dipped. And that's how my mother and ended up in New York. So, but so for me, yeah. So just hearing that, it's just, there was never any, it was very much easy I was always anti-Zionist. There was never any, so it was just always that kind of approach to it. And then my mother would always say, like, taken from her mother, that not to be trustful of the religiously practicing, and in particular was a hostility towards rabbis and priests and preachers and all the religious leaders, imams, everybody. They were like, they just live off the people. That was always the line. All they do is read. They got their head in the Bible, and they just live off the people. They don't do no work. That was always the way, so. So anyway, but that led to tension. I mean, within our family, within sort of the political space. You know, even when we moved out here from D.C. and I remember my mother was initially saying that at one point I asked her. You know, she was always, you know, she would be like, well, why don't you have this group of friends or that group of friends? I was like, well, where are your group of friends? I was like, where you don't, you know, and she was like, well, I don't really mess with Jews out here. They're bougie. They, you know, they want to, you know, go to the synagogue and then they support these polities. So it was always that kind of, I didn't realize until later how different it was. That's really, I guess, what I'm saying. That's what I was kind of deep in thought on as I was listening to Matthew, your story. But yeah, so I don't know. Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's it.
Yeah. And there were, Raphael, I see your comment. There were, you know, not all Jewish people were for the state of Israel. Like there were, I believe it was the Hasidic community, the ultra Orthodox, who were like, no, we're supposed to be led back to Israel by, oh my God, what's the word? Totally drew a blank. The Messiah. The Messiah was supposed to come back and lead us, you know, back to the state of Israel. And because it was a land deal and other countries were involved and all of that, they're like, no, this isn't right. This isn't our time. So
that was always the joke in my household. My mother would always have a version of Jesus, the Jew, didn't do what the Jews were expecting the Messiah to do. So that's why they were like, that's why Jews were always like, this is not our guy.
Yeah.
This is not the guy. Because there were several things that are specifically laid out in the Torah. So those little things, like my mother would always say, she's always saying, like, I'm a Jew, don't call me Jewish. Mm-hmm. And don't call the Torah the Old Testament. She was like, the book is full of shit. It's fake as shit, but don't call it the Old Testament. She would tell her Christian friends and everything, like, don't disrespect our book, even though I don't believe in the shit. She would even say it like that. I don't believe in the shit, but don't disrespect it by calling it the Old Testament. But she would read it and she would say, she said, read it because it's beautifully written. It's all these nice stories. It's da 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 da. It's this, that, and the third. But it's always bullshit. She would always finish with, it's always bullshit. And then, but she would point out that Jesus was supposed to have done certain things as the Messiah, or the Messiah, I'm saying, was supposed to have done certain things. Jesus didn't do any of them, according to Jews. So that's why they were like, he's not our guy. But you're right. Never mind the revolutionary left radicals, but certainly the ultra religious still to this day are like, Israel's wrong. This is not supposed to be, this is not how it's supposed to be going on. So
yeah. Raphael had asked why Jewish people couldn't settle in like Germany and Berlin. They basically closed their borders. They weren't accepting Jewish settlers, or they were accepting a very limited amount. I know, like with my grandparents who made it to Czechoslovakia, they had to be sponsored into either Israel or the United States. And I was reading somewhere earlier, like all these countries were either accepted a very limited amount or nobody at all. And so that's another part of the story is like Jewish people, like we couldn't go anywhere because nobody wanted us, and like wandering through the desert for 40 years, or like, a lot of the stories, trying to find our home, right? That's another thing that's ingrained. Like, where is our home? We don't have a home. We keep getting pushed out of, or ethnically cleansed out of, different cities, different, territories. So that's a big part of it. Like, nobody wanted us. We couldn't go anywhere. So this is our home. And that's why we stake a claim to it, and why we have a right to defend it so harshly.
And I always,
by the way, sorry. Yeah.
No, go ahead.
I just wanted to add, Winston Churchill said, he supported the Zionist project because in Europe, the ruling elite blamed Jews for radicalism. and socialism and communism. And they wanted to he said, get rid of this Jew, put him over there. I don't want them over here. So that's always, again, that's the contradiction, of course, because all the suffering and all the violence European Jews have suffered have come at the hands of Europeans. So that's why they were like, hell yeah, put them over there.
Right.
You know, like,
right. And it's always fascinating to me to point out to people, like, it's actually anti-Semitism that pushed this idea of, well, let's find somewhere to put them, right? Mm-hmm. It wasn't because the people who had control at the time were like, we really care about the Jewish people and we want to make sure they survive. It was actually, we need to find somewhere to put these people because we don't want them either. So where can we put them where we also don't have to deal with them? And at the time, you know, based on the things that I've read, like this idea of completely creating this space and just dismissing the fact that there was an entire population of people who lived there. Like if you go back and, you know, Jared, I shared the book with you a couple of weeks ago, and I told you about it this week, Matthew, the 100 Years War in Palestine.
Mm-hmm. I just
he really digs into how, you know, Britain and the US and the UN and all these people just kind of acted like it was termed like the Palestinian problem. Like, how do we manage taking over this land and removing these people who live there, you know, without anyone noticing that we're completely removing an entire population of people? And they completely left the Palestinians who were in the land at that time out of the conversation. You could not even participate in these talks as a Palestinian to defend, like, but we're here. Like, why? Are we forgetting that there's an entire population of people? And whenever I hear people talk about, you know, it was a place without a people, and like these pronouncements of like the land being empty and not having a history and not having, you know, people who were living there at the time. And it floors me that people don't take any, like at all, like not even a second to just Google and see, like there was an entire, like there was trade, there were all these things that were part of the Palestinian history that people just pretend didn't exist because it's easier to say, like, well, there was nobody there. Right, just like you said about Native Americans here, like there was nobody there. It was, you know, it was free land that we were taking over, and it's amazing to me that this is the consistent like push, you know, that this thing, they didn't exist. There was no thing, right?
We got a number of interesting questions. I don't know if you want, if either of you had anything to say immediately, or if we want to get to any.
No, I would say let's go with the questions. I want us to make sure we talk about the policing thing too, but sure. let's answer the questions while we're on the topic.
Just going in order here, real quick. Elusive Views. I've seen a couple of your comments. Just quickly, I would just want to say, please elevate what you think you know about that history. There's the history of first of all, just very quickly, what my argument, biblical history shouldn't be taken at all as history. It's not history. It's should be wildly criticized. And if you look at the four gospels, as I've been learning about a lot lately, there's an evolution of the blame on Jews for the death of Jesus as the political necessity of anti-Jewish or anti-Semitism was developing. So there's a politics at play here that's embedded in all of these stories that play out today among many, I don't know who Elusive is, but among many Black people who pick up in many even Black bookstores what purport to be Black radical histories that are themselves Black renditions of white supremacist versions of history. So when Black people who have Christianity, my humble version, imposed on them, adopt the baked in anti-Semitism or anti-Jewishness that has everything to do with the various churches and the various times these gospels and things were written. So I just would encourage folks to look into that before we just start doing this because I know this is underneath everything or a lot. European Jews are not the real Jews and they killed Jesus. So basically whatever happens to them is all good. And then all the politics that we're trying to cover here a little bit, at least, get lost in the sauce. So just a quick throw that out there.
One thing about that's interesting, you know, because I don't know, you know, maybe because so I will admit I did 23andMe and Ancestry, and you know gave my DNA. So you know whatever.
I did too. I'm guilty. I did it. Okay. I did it.
But it came back 99.7% Ashkenazi. I'm sorry, 97% Ashkenazi Jew, 2% Eastern European, and then 1% was miscellaneous. So you know my lineage having been from Poland. And then at times it was Russia because the lines changed and stuff. But coming from that region, you know, for several thousand years, you know, and having, you know, as far back as I know, like my grandparents, great grandparents, you know, were all raised Jewish. So, you know, if I'm not you know, of real lineage, you know, I don't know what to say other than I've been raised in it, and so has my family for several thousand years.
My mother's argument was that she, again, so we used to argue about this a little bit because she would take the biblical argument and start with the Great Dispersals to talk about how European Jews ended up in Europe. But when the question of this Caucasus Mountain European who the Khazars, this was brought up the other day, who took over who disguised themselves as Jews and have taken over and become the Ashkenazi that we now refer. This is the argument that I think Elusive is referencing here, that a lot in Black radical circles and Black nationalist circles engage at various points, because I think, forgive me for saying it this way, they stop at the first level of that bookshelf, and the study doesn't continue. So, and just this past year, I've personally learned a lot about the evolving arguments around how all of these histories were written, to what the latest arguments are in terms of the historicity of even Jesus himself. So what I'm trying to say very quickly, and maybe not doing a good job of, is that there's a lot of political decisions being made that are based on myths that are themselves white supremacist in origin and wrapped in a blackness that I think is in some cases confusing some folks. So of course you would have been taught in a version of what my mother was saying, and would have just experienced being raised as a Jew, and not. No, very few Jews would have engaged the versions of the histories I'm trying to quickly summarize, that I'm only engaged with because of my particular mixture and wanting to engage Black radical history. So, but I think that all of us need to improve, myself included, our study of these histories and how they're impacting our politics and our biases, where they're coming from. So,
yeah. And two, I know we got to get to questions, but like two interesting things. So prior to World War II, after World War I, the Germany, the political movement, you know, was working to blame the Jews for Germany losing World War I. One of the types of propaganda that was put out was they created a book called was it the Chronicles of the Elders of Zion, which was the mythology
Protocols.
that Jewish protocols. Yeah. Thank you. Protocols. Yeah. The Jewish people were meeting in cemeteries late at night, drinking baby's blood. And that was the conspiracy to take over the world. Right. So that was something that was circulated, that was, you know, created. The other thing that I recently learned was that Henry Ford was a huge, you know, anti-Semite, and that Hitler actually kind of idolized Henry Ford. And there was a reporter, a journalist from some U.S. publication, was one of the few people that was actually able to interview Hitler just prior to World War II. And they noted that in his office was a portrait of Henry Ford. And so Hitler learned and this is documented also, he learned, like what the United States did with Black and indigenous people here is what he applied there, and the shaping of people's hearts and minds to turn on a population. And so there's a lot of interwoven stuff there. And then like this all ties into policing and the IDF and policing here and all of that, which I know we're going to get into, but I just wanted to.
Well, one perhaps segue to that is April's question here: how does secular Judaism play into the politics? Can secular Jews be Zionists?
I mean, Christians are Zionists. Actually, I read recently that the largest population of Zionists are actually Christian Zionists, not Jewish Zionists.
Yeah.
I was just thinking, I just watched something on that was actually the largest group, which is, it all fits very well when you think about the deeply rooted like reason for all of these things, right? Like,
to me, that's the point. Like, that's the point I was getting at. Jews believe in the mythology that is their chosen homeland given by God. By the way, I like the Charles Finch version that Israel is Israel, the original African Kemetic saying the place that Ra built. But they believe that, and Christians believe, because read Revelations, old boy's coming back and violently wiping everybody out. Yeah. So they're like, we get rid of the Jews, we get rid of the Muslims, we get rid of the atheists, and we get the homeland. So they're all willing to play this political game based on these mythologies, and all happy to oppress Palestinians and whomever else. So it's
right. And it's, one of the reasons, Matthew, that I was really happy that you could come on is because of this intersection of policing and how it is playing out in this country as it relates to Zionism and to the Israeli project and the support of that project in the US. And so, I've obviously been following this for quite a long time and watching how these things are playing out in all kinds of spaces. And so I was in LA last weekend, which is where Matthew is, and Matthew and I took a little drive, and we brought some waters to the encampment at the USC campus. So, to try and just do something in a small measure to support the students that were out there. And I, as someone who, a long time ago, Ricky sent me, I don't know if you remember this, Jared, that Ricky sent me down that rabbit hole looking at the military support happening on college campuses. And so I had discovered, unfortunately, that there was a huge connection between the DoD and the military and colleges, and that the military and the DoD were using college campuses for research spaces. They were utilizing students to continue their research. It is actually as deep as there are DoD projects that are supporting science fairs and STEM projects at the high school and elementary and middle school level in Virginia. So it is deeply woven into, the fibers of the education system here in this country to be reliant upon the military and all of those defense projects that, the US government is so fond of, increasing its budget to support. So it was not surprising at all to me that in places like Columbia University and all the hundreds of now campuses where encampments have been built, that the pushback from the school and the campus was not like, we're going to support these students who are trying to think critically and trying to figure out, how to make sure that their tuition dollars aren't going towards killing off an entire population of people. We want them to learn and grow, but instead the response was, we're going to send armed people in to attack the students, and in some cases, the professors who are supporting the students. It's on our run sheet, Jared. There's an article that was released in the Appeal that breaks down like all of the things that have been happening on these campuses. And you have students being thrown downstairs, being shot by rubber bullets. I mean, it is absolute chaos. And, it's appalling to me where this has gone when you think about what the reaction is to students who are paying attention to what's happening everywhere. And so with your history and all the research that you've done on policing, I thought we could also engage in a conversation about how policing and that entire system here is also being shaped by this, this project that is happening on the other side of the world.
Yeah, with all of it, it's like I grew up learning about the civil rights movement in the 60s, and seeing the pictures and the videos of police beating protesters and sicking dogs on Black people and the fire hoses and all of that. And the context was that was wrong that happened, right? And then carry that to the Rodney King beating, which I was going to USC at the time when that happened, and then forward to I'm skipping a lot of stuff, but like the protests in 2020 after George Floyd was murdered, and seeing how the police were doing the same thing, that they were doing in the 60s. And then to have it be now on the college campuses doing the same thing they were doing with the Vietnam War protests, in the late 60s and early 70s on college campuses, and the violence and also the citizenry sitting back and being like, oh, those are just stupid college kids, they should shut up and just go back to class and learn something. Or like I was flying back last night we did a screening in Boston, so I was coming back into LA, and I was watching MSNBC on the plane, and they had a whole panel talking about the UCLA thing, which and actually, let me back up. I went to the MIT encampment in Boston on Monday, I think it was Sunday or Monday, I forget. And totally peaceful, like when you and I were at USC, same thing, like totally peaceful. Like the students were hanging out. I talked to a Jewish student who was there, and he was like, yeah, everything's fine. But on the other side of the encampment, just outside of the encampment, are all the like pro-Israel like counter protesters. And he said, yeah, they'll walk into our encampment and sing the Israeli national anthem, or they'll be like, if you're Zionistan, clap your hands, and they'll do that to taunt them, and then they'll leave. But it's all like this, this game. And so with UCLA a few days ago, again, peaceful, and then the Zionist pro-Israel counter protesters at night started firing fireworks into the encampment and throwing basically like pepper spraying and swinging bats and like trying to break down the encampment, and the police weren't there for like 3 hours. So like this big fight is going on. And then the next night, the police show LAPD and CHP, and they're shooting, like they shot one student in the face with a rubber bullet. And, so all the violence being enacted by the police and the counter protesters and, Zionists and all of that. And so, seeing all of this. And so on MSNBC, the narrative of the 4 panelists was, again, these are the poor students who, because of COVID, didn't get to graduate high school, and they don't have social skills. They didn't have a high school graduation, and they don't have social skills. They don't know how to talk to each other. They don't, so this is why they're doing what they're doing. And it's totally like infantilizing and dismissing that these students actually know what they're talking about. They're going, like one student was like, they're telling us to go out and change the world. We're in all these classes teaching us how to go out and change the world. But then when we're taking the action to do that, there's all this pushback and blowback, and that we're just like a bunch of stupid kids. And so that was the narrative. So seeing all of that, seeing how the police have been weaponized again, you know, and it's actually kind of cool because at UCLA the other night, they actually pushed back and pushed the cops out. So a couple of the accounts, People City Council that I follow, like they were documenting the whole thing. And these students who also grew up with the mass shooter drills and knowing how to like band together and rely on each other, have been able to outmaneuver.
Right. They did that in the city too. It's at CCNY. They pushed the police out of the encampment. They forced them out. And it's been interesting, you know, for me watching all these things happen, wondering if people are paying attention to how the police are treating the students, right? Like we've been screaming for years, you know, about how police treat Black people when they are trying to stand together in the face of whatever atrocity had recently occurred. And I thought it was interesting to watch and see what happened at Columbia, right? To see, I think it was just maybe a day or two ago, and Monty mentioned it in the chat, that a police officer shot his gun inside a building on Columbia University's campus, right?
Yeah.
And I'm trying to I'm trying to figure out, when people see these things happening, are they making the connection that the police state is so far out of control, right? That not even the rich, educated white kids at Ivy Leagues are safe, right? Like not even them are they safe if they stand up against this, you know, imperialist project that we have going here in the United States, which I will, by the way, don't want people to forget, is in part trained by the IDF in Israel, right? Like, I don't know if people are making that connection and that they fully understand how it really is all entwined. And that's why I get so frustrated when I see Black people say things like, you know, what do we have to do? Like, what do these people in Palestine have to do with Black people? And I'm like, you know, the way you get treated in the street is in part because the officers who are treating you that way are trained by people who have utilized all these tactics against Palestinians in Palestine. Like, we're all fighting, we're all getting beat down by the same exact power system.
Yeah.
And I don't know if people.
But the U.S. has to get a return on its investment, though, Renee. I mean, if they're going to fund the IDF, they might as well have the IDF train folks back here how to do stuff now. I mean, come on now. Let's be fair.
I know.
You know.
I know. It's wild. And it's gotten so bad. And I always wonder which story is the story that's gonna, you know, that's really gonna kind of bring it home for people that something is definitely not right here, right? And so real quick, and I hope I'm pointing you to the right one. So Jared, on row 8 in column C, I think this is the one. I think it's the Instagram link of the woman who was the chair for Jewish studies getting arrested. Yes, this is the I mean, so I see that and I think to myself, while Congress has figured out a way to meet on a Saturday to vote and say that they're going to kill TikTok, and they're going to make sure that everyone knows that, anti-Zionism is also anti-Semitism. Like, I'm wondering, at which point does someone look at the video of the woman who is the chair of the Jewish Studies Department at an Ivy League getting thrown down on the grass by police because she's trying to stand with the students who are pro-Palestinian, and think to themselves, like, something's wrong with this story, right? When you see Jill Stein getting pushed down by an officer holding a bicycle, right? And I've met Jill Stein in person. She is teeny tiny. She's also like not young, like not for nothing.
Right. She's not threatening like that
right.
chair of Jewish studies is.
Right. I know exactly. Right.
She's because she's she was a little scary.
I really wonder, at what point do people see these things, and like, is there a point where a light bulb goes off and they say, like, something's not matching in this storyline of like trying to stand with the Palestinian people makes you anti-Semitic? And I'm trying to decipher, like, where does that line happen? Like, at what point does that become a part of the conversation?
I don't think it's going to become part of the conversation, but I think the line has been crossed. And this is why we're getting the attempt to negate through propaganda, the articles like the one we talked about the other day with John McWhorter and others saying that those protests are the equivalent of violence. They're pro-Hamas. It's the ADL and Greenblatt saying we need more money for our narrative. We're losing the narrative. In other words, so the question for me is, once that line, intellectually at least, has been crossed, what then is to be done? Will all of this get siphoned off into another election for Biden? Will this get siphoned off into some various nonprofit work? Or will this evolve into some sustained political movement that threatens power, that says we actually need to have power. You all are this arrangement doesn't work, because she will be rebranded as a recalcitrant, self-hating Jew. The young folks will be dismissed as young, even though, like you were just saying, you taught us to do this. You're telling us to do this, and now we're doing it. You say don't do it. Others will. We're looking through that what you had for us there, Renee, with what's happening nationally. Others are going to get arrested. Others are just going to get sent home, like the I think the dean up there at Cornell said. But what will actually have that intellectual line crossing evolve into political? That's where I get stuck. But I do think the line has been crossed. Matthew, I don't know if you want to jump in.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's a couple things, but I keep thinking of that last line in Boys in the Hood. When when Ice Cube, when he's like, either they don't know, they don't show, or they don't care, and
then they vote for Trump.
Yeah, yeah, and then even
that was in the director's cut. I'm sorry, right. That was.
And then Biden's statement a couple days ago saying like, oh, protest is fine just as long as it's not violent, and I was having this debate. So I'm a PhD student in transformative social change, and I was in this course on theory and practice of nonviolence, and most of the material in that course is really outdated, right? It's MLK, it's Gandhi, it's stuff like that. It goes up to like Occupy, like the Occupy movement. But white supremacy has figured out how to maneuver around that and counter that. And so anything like pre-2020, is kind of outdated. And so, my take on it was there is no nonviolence. It is all violent, because it's either in response to violence or it gets recontextualized as violent. You know, kids setting up a tent, you know, and the police showing up and you know, is called violent. So but the narrative is that, oh, it's these, you know, rowdy kids who don't know any better, right? In 2020, it was, oh, the rowdy, you know, black people who are burning down Portland, right? I was just in Portland a couple months ago for a screening of the film, and they're like, yeah, that didn't happen. You know, but so it's the narrative, and it's people being complacent, and like the thing about liberals just wanting things to be like nice and peaceful and polite, and if it's not, then, oh, that's the wrong way to do that, right? Meanwhile, like January 6th happened, and you know, that's a whole other thing. But
Al
so,
Sharpton said these protests are the equivalent to that.
Right. Yeah.
To your point.
Yeah. So I think there's, I hope that this generation being radicalized, being tied to global liberation, because I think that's part of it too. And you know, we haven't specifically talked about Black liberation here and how it's tied to liberation. I know we've touched on it, but it really, like Congress just went to work to define what anti-Semitism is and to outlaw anti-Semitism, which includes criticism of Israel, right? There was the Stop Asian Hate legislation. There was all of this legislation, and nothing, like, they can't even pass an anti-lynching bill. You know, there's nothing about black liberation that's supported, legislated, anything like that, right? So and then you compare that with Palestine, and it's, you know, it's the same thing, like the dehumanization, like they're not worth it. They're animals, they're rats, they're vermin, they're this, they're that. I got caught, you know, you all were saying self-hating Jew. Like, I had somebody in my inbox yesterday calling me a useful idiot and a cheerleader for Hamas, and then saying, literally, he said MLK was Zionist, and like said I was stupid because MLK was Zionist. I'm like, well, he did say that Israel should give back the land that after the 6-Day War. And
that's a funny kind of Zionism.
Yeah, and he wasn't the only civil rights leader either.
Right.
Right.
Right. That's, you know, that's a good one. Name another Black leader and their thoughts on Zionism.
Right. Yeah.
That should be part of the. Name another one.
Right. Yeah. Who else you got? Because I know if I would have said, you know, Kwame Ture or Angela Davis, he would have been who's that? So all of that, I forgot if there was a question or what well, how do I see this play? I don't know. I just feel like, and, you know, with my film, we just had our 55th screening, which was in Boston. So I've been all over the country in community with various social justice organizations, street responders, like people doing the work. And I was in Washington State with the Black Panther Party, and like they have a whole curriculum for self-defense, self-determination, growing your own food, but they do, and not just them, but other organizations doing like firearms training and, you know, self-defense training. And so I am hoping that those of us in these movements, and I'm saying that we're getting more rooted in community and turning towards each other, and, you know, the slogan, you know, we keep us safe, that's really where our safety is going to come from. And I think that's a lot of what these college students are doing also, right? They were raised with the mass shooter drills, and that they got to take care of each other, and they got to, like, you know, put up barricades and all of that, and fight together, you know. So I feel like more of that is happening, but it is a matter of how do we stop the state from being the state. And all of these cop cities, right? There was originally it was the one in Atlanta last year, but there's over a dozen cop cities across the United States that are being built. It's like, why are they being built? For stuff that's happening on campuses like this, for stuff that was happening in the streets in 2020. And it's all modeled after the IDF and Gaza and the West Bank and how they have policed those people for decades.
And that, that was, and it's, there's so many of them. And Jared, since I made that map, which there's some TikToker that has my map up and it's been viewed like 1 million times, which is mind-boggling to me. But since I released that map, I've gotten notification of, I think, 5 or 6 more cities where they're trying to build these cop cities. And I've had 8,000 arguments now at this point of people wanting me to define what a cop city is and to put it in some terminology so people can say okay, this is the thing that we need to worry about. And I got invited to speak at Occidental College a couple of weeks ago, and I did the panel, and that was one of the questions, how do you define a cop city? And I want people to get out of this attempt to make it a particular thing, so only that's the one that you fight, right? So if we start talking about cop cities and trying to put them in this box where they have to be a certain size, a certain price, they have to eat up a certain amount of land in order for it to be a cop city for people to be angry about, I fear that what will happen is we will ignore the places that are not spending a ridiculous amount of money or eating up a ridiculous amount of land, because those are as dangerous, right? Like if you are in Ithaca, New York, right? They might not be putting $8 million or $12 million or $60 million towards something, but there are actually 3 or 4 different facilities being built all over the state of New York that don't have that cost, but they are still an expansion of the police state. And so for me, it's really important for us to try and get away from this language of trying to define cop cities in a certain way, because when I look at places there's a facility that's, I think it's already open in New Hampshire. I'm trying to remember the map off the top of my head. And it's not a huge facility. It's less than $5 million, but now you have an expanded police state in that upper northeast corner of the country. And it may not be a humongous facility. It may not have cost hundreds of millions of dollars, but they now have the ability to do exactly what is happening all over the country on these college campuses. And for me, once you expand your police state, even if the facility itself is not a cop city, your city is now a cop city, right? Like you are now a cop city. And see, somebody just said it. You don't like my music. Every city is a cop city. And that is literally what they're trying to do, in my opinion. And so, now that my spreadsheet is, I think it's up to 75 cities where they are in the process of building, expanding, constructing, voting on, trying to bond for, whatever have you, some means to expand the police state. That is a lot. That's a lot, across the entire nation. And part of the reason that conversation about cop cities, when I first started doing this research, and I think this was the first time I came on, Jared, wasn't it? We talked about that map might have been the second or third show that we did, was talking about that initial research.
Yeah, no, it started with the Cornell West recaps.
Right, yes. And then
the Post-Wests.
Post-West. But it's been months now of having these conversations of how the police state is expanding across the country, and it's going to be utilized to ensure that the voices of the people are crushed at every opportunity. And that is the whole purpose. Like, you expand the police state and you expand the armed officers of the state, the armed agents of the state, as Dhoruba likes to call them, in order to make sure that you have the ability to silence, to shut down, to brutalize, to kill, to do all these things to the people who have the audacity to speak out against what the state is doing.
No, absolutely. Sorry, yeah. No, that's exactly, I mean, I don't know I don't have anything to add to that. Bars.
Yeah, I got nothing.
The plan wasn't to silence everybody. So good though. Good. I'm glad I had it covered. But it's an important thing. So all right. So on the other side of this, Jared knows one of the things that I always want to make sure that we're encouraging people to do is to learn, right? Because as I've said, I really and fully believe that a big part of the problem here is people just simply don't know, right? They have no idea, like, whatsoever about why anything is happening. And I'm always surprised. Actually, surprised is not a good word for it, because I am fully aware that most people do not have time to dig in to try and figure out, like, the historical nature of all these things that are happening in so many different places. So a couple of weeks ago, I discovered that there's a whole database for when people say that there's been discrimination in a school district or on a college campus with regard to religious sorry, I'm blanking on the word, but it's the title 11, I think. And Jared, when I sent you the link, you couldn't get it to work. So I didn't bother sharing the link again. But, on that site, Matthew, what I discovered was, like, we jumped exponentially in the amount of school districts and colleges and universities that are now being, they're actually investigating to see, like, what is going on with regard to discrimination based on religion, what is happening in these places. And it went from, I think it was like 16 places that were being investigated in 2022 to, like, I think it was 19 in 2023. And since November of last year to last month, it was 79, right? Which is a massive jump. And so you start thinking about what is it that is calling these things into the eye in this way. Like, you look at, the Senate hearings and these conversations and what these people are being asked about, like, what are you teaching on your campuses that is causing this anti-Semitism? And I think a big thing that's being missed, and Geechee and I talked about this very briefly last week, is part of what's feeding anti-Semitism is this refusal to teach history, right? If you don't teach people the facts, if you don't give the historical viewpoints, if you don't tell about, like, how things got to the way they are, then people naturally make assumptions about what's happening. And Lord knows, if you base your assumptions on what, like, mainstream media gives, right, you are totally being fed the wrong story. And I'm curious about your thoughts on, the overarching facts of, like, we're not teaching facts. So people are making up their own stories. They're filling in the blanks in whatever way. And always the voice that's the loudest is the one that gets heard, right? So if the wrong people are screaming information, then you end up with a bunch of misinformed people who are just fighting based on, like, purely, like, false information and false history. So how do we, like, what are your thoughts on, like, trying to fully educate people, because this conversation and what you brought today with regard to what actually is taught in schools when you are a Jewish young person and what you're learning about Israel and Zionism, like how do we combat that now that it is so overwrought with false information and propaganda? I know it's a big question.
Yeah. Well, I mean, at the root of it, it's like you were saying, it's education. Like if we actually were real about our history and about what's happening, because a lot of it is reactionary, it's trying to shape narratives, it's trying to because again, anti-Semitism is definitely happening. Like there are swastikas on college campuses that have happened. There were people chanting like death to Jews after October 7th. Like that was happening. But then there's the other part of somebody just feels uncomfortable because there's a Palestinian flag in an encampment, or somebody wearing a keffiyeh, or something like that. And so like like really having to look at what is one person's liberation and what is anti-Semitism, and is it and it's like whiteness, right? When people say, oh, reverse racism, no, it's I just feel uncomfortable because I'm being held accountable, or my beliefs are being challenged, or something like that. I also, I was like, man, if these schools were like half as woke as they get accused of, they'd be amazing. As a side note, reimagining safety, I did as my master's thesis at the graduate school I attended, and they have never shown the film there. And there were teachers that wanted to show the film, and the school is like, billed as this like progressive, social justice focused, change the world kind of program, which the program was great, but the board of directors are all super conservative, and they're like, we can't show that movie. We can't talk about abolition. And so, and then, I mean, I guess the other part is like, you're looking at the schools and there being the protests to divest the schools taking money from Israel, or contributing money to Israel, right? And so it's the money part. It's always the capitalism. It's where the funding's coming from that we keep going back to. So I think it's at the root, like the simple solution is to like, let's just be real. And there's so much in the way because people are benefiting from the false narrative, just like with racism and mass incarceration in the United States, and the brutalization of Black and brown people. There are people profiting off of that, and they have way too much power.
Yeah, if I can, I would just want to add quickly that I mean, I was trying to think of I can't do this in a short answer, so it'll just be terrible. But it kind of going back to what I was saying before, the levels of mythology people are raised on is dominant here. To the extent Jews in Hebrew school are taught a certain narrative that no one else knows about and is biases Jews. Christians have a version of that. Many other groups have variations of that. The public school system has its sort of white nationalist, U.S.-centric bias to it. To your point about the lack of actual wokeness that's being, decried as some leftist revolution is crazy. But all of it, by the way, I think has a very anti-Black and anti-class and anti-radical, even in terms of their own histories. I mean, I don't think Jews, correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't think Jews are particularly like even in Hebrew school, there's no track that teaches Jews about the revolutionary history of Jews. I mean, it's like, correct me if I'm wrong, like there's no...
I didn't know that the partisans existed until my grandmother died, and the rabbi was like, yeah, she was part of the partisans for a brief time. And I was like, what? My grandmother was like 4'6". I'm not kidding, and so her and my grandfather, the thought of them carrying rifles and, I was never taught that.
Yeah, so that's sort of what I mean. Like, and none of these groups are taught the radical versions of their own history. They're all taught variations that encompass some form of again, hatred of some other group, mostly Black people, and then Black people. We all end up interacting at sort of the at the nexus points of either the worst among us or the worst conditions, and then you add these narratives, and that all benefit a ruling, and I think underappreciated for their contribution, WASP elite that are very happy to have Jews. They're very happy. Yeah, blame the Jews for Jesus, blame the Jews for the economy, blame the Jews for the media, blame the Jews for Israel and Palestine, and don't look over here. Yeah. And how much money and land we have. You know what I'm saying? It's like, but then I do, but then there is the reality that these forms of education are largely successful in that they create barriers that are difficult to overcome unless people are in radical left organizations. That's really the only way it gets done. Otherwise, we're only interacting at various levels of ignorance and hostility.
And these spaces are small, right? Like sometimes I am amazed at the things that really smart people that I know don't know, right? Like these spaces where these real conversations are being had, and there's actual discourse that is happening between people who are fully aware of like the history. Like these are not the things that end up in the mainstream. These are not the conversations that get promoted. They're not the things that get replayed for regular people to watch, right? And sometimes I'm talking to someone who I think is like, really smart, and then they say something. I have a Jewish teacher in my building, and we were having a quasi reasonable conversation about this, and she was talking about the Jewish people in her family's history that went to Palestine before the land was given. And I wasn't aware of this history. Apparently there was a group of Jews that had gone before the land was renamed, and they had a hard time surviving on the land, right? They couldn't grow the crops. They couldn't, they got sick. There were, all these things that happened. And so she was, she fast forwarded and she started talking about when, Israel pulled out of Gaza, and she was like, we pulled out. And and I said, okay, but Israel was still in control of the water, the oil, the food, the imports. It was under siege. And she was like, what do you mean? She had yeah, Jared, that face, exactly. Like she had no understanding that even though the Israelis were told to leave Gaza and to, go to the West Bank, to the settlements in the West Bank, that Israel still controlled Gaza. She had no idea. And so when
it also doesn't seem to occur to them that the Palestinians can't leave. Like you could leave and pull back, but they can't go anywhere.
They can't go anywhere. Not by sea, not by land. And nothing can come in by sea or by land that's not controlled by the Israeli government. And so when you have these conversations with people who think they know, right? And then you point something out and they're like, well, what do you mean? And then you realize they really don't know. Like there is truly there is a vast gap in the understanding of the history of what has happened in that land. I mean, it is vastly unknown. And I admittedly, as a person who falls down rabbit holes and likes to know things, I made it my business to understand that stuff, right? Like it was a point for me to make sure that I understood it. And I always have to remind myself that a lot of people are not like me. Like, people are perfectly comfortable in their ignorance, and they're perfectly happy to not know something. And I think in part it's because if you don't know, then you feel like you won't be held responsible for being complicit in something that you know good and goddamn well you should have no business being complicit in.
But I actually think that I think most people are made to think that they do know. I don't know that. I may slightly disagree that they're happy to be ignorant. I think that they know, or that they know enough, whether it's through their religious beliefs or what they get on CNN or from their family. It's not a lot, but they feel like they got the basics. They're like, yeah. We're supposed to be over there. The Palestinians, they're all terrorists, or the opposite. It's not. I think it's that nuance. It's the level of conversation we're attempting here that I think is discouraged and never built upon. But my concern is just that I think people do think they know, and they can see a documentary or worse, just a clip on TV or whatever, or a TikTok, and they're like, I'm good, I got it. I got it. They'll go, and then they can go and watch Golda and have everything confirmed for them. I mean, that movie was unbelievable. But I mean, it's or they could go, they could go watch whatever, and like, yeah, I got it. I think I got it. And then they go to Netflix and get Black History from Obama now. So it's like, I'm good. I can go watch. I can get my yeah. Anyway, it's a mess. We're in trouble. We're in real trouble. Golly.
We really are. It really, it is. And audience, just so you know, Jared and I are going to have to circle back and do a whole show on these movies, because I was trying not to watch any of them because I don't want to get aggravated. But then I was on a plane and they were all free. So I was like, okay, I guess I'll watch all these movies that I didn't want to pay to watch. So I've seen Barbie now, which, oof.
Yeah.
Oof. And I've now seen American Fiction. And I've also seen Origin. Oof. And so, so they're all, have you seen 26 to Life, Matt? Have you heard of it?
So no, I've heard of it, but I haven't seen it.
So audience, there's also a documentary on ESPN now about the prisoners at San Quentin.
Jog to freedom.
Running the marathon. So that was a lot. It was a lot. Matthew, I think you should watch. Maybe we should circle back and bring Matthew back, and we'll talk about 26
and Origin. I think if we're gonna, if he should come back and watch Origin and talk about if you haven't seen it. I mean, because that's sort of my point. People will watch that and be like, oh, I got it. That was I got it. Yeah. And they'll be like, yeah, I understand race and caste, and now I understand the experience of Jews and the relationship between Black people and Jews. They're gonna be like,
right.
I'm good.
And I wonder, so Matt, this is good. We got to do this, Matthew, because Matthew's also a filmmaker. So he could do, we could break down the whole.
But will you hate on other filmmakers publicly, Matthew? See, that's the question.
Yeah,
that's the real question. Okay, because sometimes artists get that solidarity, that artist solidarity. We need you to be. No, I'm just.
No, I had a whole deep conversation about Fight Club with one of my anti-racism mentors a while back, because when it first came out, I almost walked out of the theater because I was like, why did I just sit through all this gratuitous violence? What was the point? And then I got the deeper meaning. They're fighting back against capitalism and the system, and it's like a revolutionary kind of thing, and and then I watched it about 4 or 5 months ago, and I was like, these are just a bunch of white guys who have never had to deal with any adversity, who are so bored in their lives because they don't have to deal with adversity, that they're getting in fights with each other. And there's the whole tear down the system, but I was so I hated it again. And then my mentor was like, he's like, I love that film because it's white people telling on themselves. I was like, oh, okay. So yeah, I mean, I'll talk about Fincher and like, I mean, you know, actually, you know, in Reimagining Safety, there's a section on propaganda, and so revisiting movies and TV shows that I grew up with, you know, like Cobra, like the Stallone movies and the like all the Cold War movies, and then the cop shows. Like I'm love tearing into those now, and just seeing them through that different light.
Yeah, man, I still had G.I. Joe. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
like
we'll need to do
stuff.
we'll need to do all of it, because that's all part of the problem, right? Like this constant feeding of nonsense. And I'm still struggling, Jared, with, you know, do they think they know? Because I believe that people, they have to know when they watch a movie that it's scripted, right? Like
I don't think it works like that though.
Oh, I don't think people really think.
But like, but Origin is a movie. It's not like it's a documentary. Like it's not the woman like and following her around as she travels and does her thing to do her research. Like it is a dramatic retelling of her telling of her story of how she wrote her book.
So I've seen articles where people think Fargo is real just because it says based on a true story. People believe a lot of shit, man. People, I think, and then when in that film, when she has the pretense of it being based on a book, and she's going through interviewing people in the film, I think it's meant to convey a sense of documentary. And then even the problem is, Matthew, I'm sure you know, that even a fact of it being a documentary doesn't mean it's going to be right or good,
right. Yeah,
or apolitical, which makes it even so. Yeah, I don't.
Yeah, all right. You know what? Yeah, because people in the chat are like, Renee, you know better. I hate this idea that we're so stupid, that people are so stupid that you can.
But that's not it though. So I don't. My thing is, it's not that people are stupid. It's that I think we have to more appreciate the power that these media have, and that the sophisticated, increasingly sophisticated nature.
The Vernon philosophy.
But it's also that, and I mean, I really do. I don't think, you know, add to it all of the bad education and the flawed histories and all that other stuff. But I think this stuff is, Matt, I mean, you tell me. I mean, I think it's harder to decipher between good and bad, this, that, because everything is so sophisticated now.
Well, I think, and because I'm sitting here like kind of thinking through all of this, and part of it, like if I think back to growing up and, you know, the movies and TV I consumed, like there was part of me that was like, oh, they wouldn't put it on TV if it wasn't real. You know, they wouldn't make this movie if that's not how it happened. And so when I think of movies like Cobra, right, where, you know, he's the loner detective who, like, they literally say he's the guy we call when the police can't handle it. And the movie is all about like the bad people are so evil, right? I think they're even like Satan worshipers, like in the movie, right? They're so evil that we need cops who don't follow the rules, because if you play by the rules, then the evil people win, right? And so while yes, it's a movie and it's entertainment, that with all of these other shows, and then like CSIs where like, you know, crime gets solved within an hour, and, you know, SWAT, and they're taking out the bad guy, like all of it just becomes like, oh, this is how it is. You know, it's entertainment, but on some level, this is how it is. And I don't think people critically take the time to think, you know, oh, this is entertainment, this isn't real, because nobody is saying this is fiction. Even though we're supposed to be able to know this is fiction. But if all of these shows and movies are basically saying the same thing, then we kind of just assume that that's how it is, I think.
And Renee, I feel like it was something you had me reading from one of your run sheets, but there was something where the paramedics were acknowledging that they were using techniques that they were learning from shit they saw on the TV show.
Yeah, yeah.
It's like it's like it's like
Yes.
the TV show is copying them, but then they're learning from the TV show. They're like, oh yeah, we could, and it's like, oh whoa. When I saw that, I was like, wait. Now I feel like now we finally gone too far. I would hate to think. I'm gonna ask my doctor. Like, is this your real advice, or is this some shit you saw on Chicago Hope or whatever? You're like, wait a minute, what are you telling me right now?
Yeah,
and then all of the reality shows, which those are they're not scripted up front, but reality shows are heavily scripted on the back end. Like those stories are shaped,
right?
And then you have shows like Cops, where like those just show like how criminals in a bad light, but the cops are here protecting us and they're super friendly, right? All of that. And so like we don't even know what's real and what's not. And then you take a scripted show and you have like the shaky camera style where it looks documentary style. So like people don't know. I don't. Yeah.
One year I had one of my students, I should see if I could, I wonder if I could ever track her down. It's been so long now, but I actually had a student who was in my class while in one of the seasons of Making the Band, No Diddy. And it was coming out relatively close enough where she was able to talk in almost real time about how it was not, she was like, this is not, what you see in the final edited product is made to look a certain way. And she would talk about even that they would instigate certain conflict and things like that. And then they told her, you're too short, chubby, and dark to make it. You can't be all three. If you're gonna be this dark, you got to be taller and thinner. Or you got, they were basically, but she could sing. She was a brilliant singer. And a good student too, by the way. So but yeah, I just remember that it was a fascinating moment in to be able to have that experience of having her say, yeah, what you saw or what you're about to see in a couple weeks is not
true.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I guess I'm just gonna give up on it. No, I'm just joking. I mean, we can't give up on it. Like we have to, if at the end of today and watching this, whenever people watch it, someone has gained some knowledge about the Zionist belief, or that there are Jewish people who are actively being attacked in trying to support Palestine, like all these things to debunk the popular and the propagandized version of what media is telling people, then we've done at least something. That's always the goal, is to do at least something, because you can't, I can't sit back and do nothing. That's not really my way. And as I'm learning, it's going to get me in trouble, right? Like it's actively going to get me in trouble. And I've decided that I'm okay with that, right? I'm okay with being in trouble with the powers that exist, because I would prefer to sleep at night, right? And for me, being able to sleep at night and being able to know that I did the thing that was the right thing to do, that's more important to me. And I will live with it, whatever consequences come from choosing to do the right thing. Like I'll figure it out, because that's more important to me than anything. And so, Matthew also, what's something else you both have in common? You have both been to my job and met my coworkers and spoke to my students. Look at that. I completely forgot until just now.
Yeah, no. And I was just telling, was it my wife? Somebody, I can't remember who I was talking to, but I was talking about that experience yesterday, that it was great. And it was obvious how positive your impact is. So it was good to see. Because if you show up at my job, it's just, you're just going to take a lonely walk, a lonely, quiet walk through campus and through the buildings until we get to my classroom with people with a lot of little weird little looks. Like, is he still here? Like, or who is that? Like, my daughter was in my office a couple weeks ago, and somebody has been there. I've been there longer than him. Was talking about, hi, I just want to introduce myself. I was like, yeah, I'm Jared. How you doing? Been here almost 20 years, but nah, don't worry about it. You know what I'm saying? I'm just over here in my little corner. Don't worry about it. Yeah, he was like, yeah, nice to meet you. I was like, yeah. But go to Renee's job, boy. It's like, hey.
It was like
I think we got to teach, we got to bring information, man. We got to bring information. That is the least we can do in this era of madness and propaganda and just outright lies, is to bring the truth where we can. But it's 12:55, Jared.
Time to stretch.
Get
hydrated, stretch.
Turn it down.
I'm watching in the car, and I'm still gonna stretch because sometimes I get amped. You just got to swing real quick. Like, yeah.
So Matthew, thank you.
Yeah.
One of the goals at some point in time now, especially that Jared has watched the documentary and knows how good it is that we will do some movie version of Saturdays with Renee, and we'll bring you back and we'll watch the documentary and we'll have a whole conversation about that. I would love to do that in addition to bringing you back. So maybe we can get both your doc. I don't want to mess up his name. Who talked to you about American fiction?
Mtume.
Maybe we can bring the four of us. Let's do it. Yeah. All right. So we'll figure something out. We'll definitely have you back, Matthew. I thank you so sincerely for
my pleasure
for speaking and for sharing your history and your knowledge. It is so important for people to also get that understanding. And I really, truly, truly appreciate you.
Yeah. And I'll thank you. And thank you everybody who's watching and Jared. And I just wanted to mention Jewish Voices for Peace is one of the big accounts on Instagram. They have chapters all over, and they're a Jewish organization that anti-Zionist that's fighting for a free Palestine. So they have great information, and they've been doing a lot of the heavy lifting, as far as Jewish community supporting a free Palestine.
Absolutely. And actually, Jared, on our run sheet is a link to a Jewish Voices for Peace cartoon, animated history of Israel and Palestine. And it's something that that the Lukman showed, and they did a a teach-in on Palestine a couple of years ago that's still on BPM. It's on the channel somewhere, but this is the actual cartoon that they showed to teach that history, and it's brilliantly done. So if you want to add that link somewhere in the
I'll put it in the show description. Yeah.
And people can watch that.
And we'll put a link to JVP there too. Yeah.
All right. Cool.
All right. Thank you.
All right, everybody. Thanks again. Peace if you wanted to fight for it, like Fred Hampton used to say. And we'll see you next week right here on Saturday with Renee.